And this brings us to our second sponsor coordinated session, brought to you by Optum Infusion Pharmacy. Join us to learn more about short bowel syndrome consumers' parenteral nutrition independence journey using Optum's Intestinal Rehab program. During this interactive session, you will hear from both the consumer, David, and the clinician, Maria Karimbakis, as they discuss the benefits of a home-based intestinal rehab program. The program, brought to you by Optum Infusion Pharmacy, helps you achieve your goals in reducing the need for parenteral nutrition therapy and intravenous fluids.
Welcome to this session hosted by Optum Infusion Pharmacy. Today, we are learning about how the Optum Intestinal Rehab program can help people with short bowel syndrome achieve their goals in reducing the needs for TPN and IV fluids. I'm Elena, and I work with the Optum Patient Advocacy Team, and I'm joined today with Maria Karimbakis and David as we discuss his journey through his home intestinal rehab program. Welcome, Maria and David.
Thank you.
Hi.
Okay, so let's get started. Maria, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and this program?
Sure. Well, thanks, and welcome, David. Thanks for being with us today. So I'm a registered dietitian and board certified in nutrition support, and I worked at the Nutritional Restart Center, the first intestinal rehabilitation program. I've been providing clinical care and education to short bowel consumers for more than 20 years. And for those of you unaware, the intestinal rehabilitation concept was researched and developed by Doctors Wilmore and Byrne in Boston, Mass. In 1993. And since 2000, intestinal rehabilitation has been incorporated into care at medical centers of excellence nationwide, typically offered in conjunction with intestinal transplant programs. So understanding that IR is the foundation for treatment in short bowel, I'm pleased to be the Optum Intestinal Rehab Program Manager. So this program is a coordinated approach with diet and medication education, customized to the patient's lifestyle and goals, all in an attempt to safely reduce a patient's dependence on IV therapy.
David, can you tell us about yourself and how you started on TPN?
Sure. So I'm now 62. I live in Seattle. I'm a book editor. And when I believe I was 58. So in 2017, I came down with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a disease that, a condition or whatever it is, that the nervous system, my immune system turned on my nervous system. And so I started feeling numbness and tingling in my hands and feet. And I went to ask about it, and within a day or so, I was in the hospital getting treatment for this Guillain-Barré syndrome. And that's, it has people have a wide range of experiences with it. Some people wake up and they're utterly paralyzed and have to go on a ventilator. It can happen to real little kids. It can happen to older people. So mine was kind of a medium range one. I was in the hospital and I was for maybe 5 days or so. And I was undergoing treatment. There's a couple different treatments that they try to arrest it or contain it anyway. And so I'd completed one of those treatments, and these are like the one, I think the weirdest one was plasma replacement therapy. So it was taking my blood out and giving me fresh plasma. I don't know. And it felt very strange. And I made like 4 of the 5 treatments of that when I just started having a vascular meltdown that they didn't understand what was going on. And but what it was doing was I was it was shooting off blood clots to various points in my body, and there was a lot of internal bleeding and a lot of dissections in my arteries in several places, so it was not going well. And so went in and they opened me up a couple times, and then discovered that one of the clots had hit my small intestine and kind of blew it up. And so they had to make the quick decision. So they removed, I believe the percentage is 85% of my small intestine. And at that point, very little of my large intestine. And then later on, they ended up having to take, so a total of, I believe, about 20% of my colon also. And in the meantime, I'm still knocked out because of the Guillain-Barré syndrome. So I had, which I guess is very common, like people who get short bowel syndrome come by it in all different ways. And a lot of times it's as a part of a complex of issues, right?
Yeah.
And so I was in the hospital for 3 months and lost 50 pounds, and it was, I don't know how much detail you'd like me to go into, but I was always dealing with those two things at once. Finally, when I went home, I moved from the wheelchair to a walker to a cane and leg braces, and finally walking slowly and not very long. And so that was about a year and a half that I just blew by there. And in that time, I was also on IV nutrition. And so my wife had to be trained up on, helping me administer that, which probably a lot of your audience knows all about that. And that is, at that point is when I got matched up with Maria, who was then with a different outfit that has since become Optum. And Maria's in Boston, I'm in Seattle, and I'll just warn you now that I tend to tear up when I talk about Maria. So this is probably going to happen. But she was hugely important for me and my wife, and then also my sister is a nurse. She came up from Oregon to live with us for those first couple months when I was just a mess, and it just made all the difference to have someone so knowledgeable and easy to talk with, and had a sense of humor, or by that I mean she laughed at my jokes, and that's critical. And it was, she's always the first thing I talk about when I talk about my path through this. And now I'm skipping over a lot, but I weaned off of TPN, and she helped me with that and worked with my suite of confused doctors here in Seattle. I mean, not so much confused, they were doing their best, but no one could figure out what triggered that vascular meltdown, or if I was going to have another one, or what. And there's all kinds of ideas about why that happened, but I seem stable. And now I'm happy to say, I mean, I do have to eat 5 times a day, like 4 that almost count as meals, and some hearty snacks in there. But I can eat really widely, and I know that I'm comfortable with this group in talking about my bowel performance, and that for the last year or more now, I have for a while there, I was really trying to put on weight, and so it's not a good program where I was kind of holding it and trying to just go once a day. And I did that for a while, and now I've settled into the much more comfortable twice a day, and really fully formed and better than it was before as far as cleanup goes. So it's just I feel really very lucky to be where I am with as far as my gut issues and the short bowel stuff, and a lot of that goes to Maria and the outfit around her, which I believe has all been folded into Optum now. And the home health care folks were terrifically supportive. Anyway, I'll stop talking now.
No, that's okay. It sounds like quite the journey. Maria, what made David a good candidate for home-based intestinal rehab?
Sure. Well, as David has outlined, he had a really rough start to the process of short bowel and abruptly entered the world of short bowel, like so many patients do. And as you said, David, also really well. There's, because short bowel is caused by so many different things, often there aren't two patients that are exactly alike. So that can be, a real hallmark of this condition, is just that it's a very, very wide range in experiences. But having said that, David, just by the nature of the fact that he has short bowel, makes him a candidate for the program. So the program is geared towards those with short bowel, and the requirements are sort of just a few. You have to come home from the hospital and safely be home on parenteral nutrition in the home setting, and basically interested in weaning parenteral nutrition and motivated to participate in the program. And then I guess I would also have to say that just working with a team that's open to recommendations from an outside team. And David was working with a couple of different providers that were very open to that. And they did a lot of legwork up front to be able to get their insurance, if I'm remembering correctly, David, to be able to come on to the program initially. Yeah. By that, I mean, in order to be able to be a participant in the ThriveRx program, which it was at the time. But clinically, when David started with us, as he mentioned, he didn't mention how tall he is, but I always like to talk about that part of it, because he is very tall. Is it 6'5"? Is that right, David?
Right? 6 foot 6.
6'6".
Wow.
So yeah. David is very tall and he has very high calorie needs. So that makes for an interesting, that sort of actually just emphasizes how, again, his, he sort of put it lightly as to how much he's eating, but he has to eat a lot of calories to sustain a 6'6" body. And that is no small task with short bowel. So I really have to underscore that. And when he came to us, when he first went home, he was just 83% of his goal weight. So really weaning was not our plan from the get-go, because he couldn't be considered for weaning until he had gotten back to goal weight. So for the first little while, it was just about eating and getting on track. And he was having trouble with the eating part. First, it was because he had been in the hospital for 3 months, and he was sure that when he got home, that would get better, because his fabulous wife, Paula, is a fabulous cook. And so he knew that just getting home was going to help, and it did. But he soon, unfortunately, reached a roadblock because as we continued to advance the diet at home with all good home cooking, he started vomiting. And vomiting is actually not an expected symptom for short bowel patients. So we started to think, like, this isn't quite right. This isn't the way that this is supposed to be going. So we quickly talked back to his team, his local team, and he went in and saw his surgeon. And sure enough, he did have a bit of an obstruction that required a follow-up surgery. And as David mentioned, he had a little bit of colon. Initially, he had all his colon, and then he had to have a little bit of it removed. So for those that are wondering how much bowel he has exactly, it's just under 3 feet. So under 3 feet of bowel and of small bowel and about 2/3 of his colon. So really good anatomy to work with. But like I said, being such a tall guy, his calorie needs are a lot more than, I wouldn't say all of my patients, but certainly a good portion of my patients. So that was certainly, a challenge, a personal challenge for David. But he, as I mentioned, good candidate for the program, just being interested in the program, ready to wean when he could, and just ready to jump in with both feet. And both he and his wife were very eager to learn what they needed to eat, and just kind of wanted to be told what to do and when, because they wanted off as soon as somebody said it was possible.
Right. Probably more than my share of bacon, which I need to watch. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So just for clarification for those listening today, you are completely off of parenteral nutrition?
Yeah, for quite a while now. Do you know, Maria, about when I get lost in time?
Yeah, January of 2019, you came off.
Wow.
Okay.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Yep.
So we really stepped it down very slowly.
Very slowly. Yeah, it took about a year.
And I did lose a good amount of weight, of course, when we got rid of the, started phasing out the TPN. My weight dropped down, and I was, I'm very svelte now, at like 183 when I was comfortable at like 223 or 220 or so before. But sculpted steel.
And what we always say about that is we're willing to accept the lower weight if all other nutrition parameters are good. And in David's case, he continues to get his vitamin and minerals checked, and those are all good. He has, he has changed his supplements, and he does a lot orally. But in addition to that, your functional status is good. And that's just such a key piece to nutrition, is that, we worry about weight, of course, and if he hadn't stabilized, we wouldn't have been comfortable keeping you off of TPN. But certainly we tend to, in the world of short bowel, accept that lower body weight if other nutrition parameters can be normal, and the, and your functional abilities can be normal as well. Because certainly not having that catheter in any longer and having those risks associated with long-term catheter access and TPN do outweigh, these circumstances. So we want to be sure that, and so everybody, I'm sure everyone that's listening sort of understands what I mean by that, but we've got to look at the whole picture, because there's, anybody can take anybody off of TPN. It's how well do you stay off of the TPN, and that's the real key.
So that's a really good point. So for those of us not familiar, what does the Optum Intestinal Rehab program involve? Like, do you have meetings? You guys are in different parts of the country. Did you give him homework? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So as I think we said, that participation is all from the comfort of your home. So that's the beautiful part. And that was pre-COVID, before we were all summoned to our homes. So that for sure. But it's meant to be an at-home program. It involves weekly phone calls that are scheduled and initially are fairly lengthy. We were on the phone for good periods of time, providing diet education both to David and his wife. And then there is an online component. If people are comfortable utilizing the online component, we have recorded topics on nutrition and the diet education for patients to listen to on their own or with their caregivers at their own pace. So that's available to folks as well. So in terms of homework, there is a little of outside work that way if you're up for that. The other homework that I think is an important part, and David was an excellent example of, is record keeping. So that's a real key component. So really the best measure that we have in determining how well the bowel has adapted is through clinical monitoring. So there's a few things that we look at kind of routinely. First and foremost is weight. And so getting into the habit of daily weight monitoring is really, really important. So weighing and recording, and David did that, and I believe still does that to this day daily. So that is an important piece. And then intake and output records are really quite valuable. Now, they're not something that we have patients do every single day. Although David did choose to keep his intake records and his stool frequency on his own, he found an app on his own, he liked using it, and that was really quite beneficial for him and for me, because then I had those reports, which were great. But keeping track of food and fluid helps us to not only track calories, but to understand like when he's eating, the timing of the day, and how food is distributed through the day, so that we can get a good understanding of how that food is then affecting the output. So then if we have stool records, we know, like, we went to the bathroom at a certain time, we look back at the food record to sort of make the correlation between the food and the output. And then also knowing, and we didn't do this all the time, but we did spot checks certainly at the beginning, and then as we went along, certainly with the weaning, knowing how much urine someone is making is key to be sure that they're staying hydrated, and making the minimum amount of urine to be sure that the kidneys are well protected. So that's something that we check in on, and another real valuable tool, because when you're on TPN, you're going to make enough urine most of the time, unless you're really having very, very high output. We can find a way to give you enough TPN. The hard part is taking away the TPN and making sure that the person is drinking enough fluid that's hydrating them well enough to keep their kidneys happy. So we gave him some nice parameters around that. And then that ongoing weight checks tells us a lot about, not just about his lean body mass, but how well hydrated he is too. So that's really the homework part of it, is keeping track of all of that. The more information the patient can keep and provide back to their clinical team, the better decisions we can make. And I just have to say that David did that just beautifully. And so that made it we were very confident in our decisions about when it was time to make a change to his regimen, because he provided us with such great objective data.
And it helped me to keep, like, when it was a drag to write down everything I ate and drank and all that, but it also helped me get in the habit of being intentional about it, focused on what I was doing, to know so I internalized all that, and it helped a lot. And I was also glad that I don't think we ever had to measure, like, weigh my bowel output or anything. It was just like on the app. We were glad to avoid that. And it's just like on the app, I would sort of grade my poop, and so that I got in the habit of doing that, and that was really one of the another great benefit of those weekly calls with Maria, is that there was someone out there I knew who was just as interested in my poop as I was, and it helped. I think my wife and daughter appreciated Maria playing that role. Some of that could flow towards her.
So
beyond that, I did appreciate the materials that Maria would send along from what was then Thrive, and that she described, like kind of PowerPoint decks or and then kind of made the decision to kind of back off doing much internet research myself. I had, actually the biggest part was not just Maria, but I think I kind of lucked into a good support group of doctors, and I try to imagine having done this without one of those components or multi, and so if you don't feel like you have that, I would urge you to not be afraid to shift to a different dietitian or whatever to make sure you're getting that kind of group, because like I say, I kind of blundered into a great situation, and I had my sister, like, she's now a retired nurse, up here for those 2 months, and because it was bewildering, and the stakes are high with TPN, as far as just not, Paula, my wife, was very concerned about killing me with the TPN, and she had zero confidence in her ability to do it. But when we kind of had to do it, she discovered she kept hearing after that, people would assume she was a nurse or would tell her that, she would be a great one. And she would always say, I don't want any part of that. But it was there in her to take a breath and focus her way through the step-by-step materials and develop those patterns. And when you have to do it a couple times a day or whatever for day after day after day, you do develop the skills to do it. So we surprised ourselves with our ability to plug our way through these. But again, I feel very fortunate not to have had any major setbacks once I kind of crossed the one threshold of being able to eat well and stuff. So I know I've been really lucky.
Wow. Well, Maria, if somebody in the audience is interested in learning more about Optum Intestinal Rehab or Optum Infusion Pharmacy, what should they do?
Sure. Well, we'd love to speak with you if you are interested. You can reach out to a nutrition patient liaison. You can ask your Optum dietitian that you might already be working with, or talk to one of the pharmacists in the branch that you're serviced out of. And I think we were going to add the website and telephone number if we could. We're going to do that. We're going to add that to the chat so that you all have that information handy and can connect with us. And certainly we're appreciative of the Oley Foundation, and they know where to find us as well. So if your best contact is the Oley Foundation, which I hope it is, because everyone values their involvement in their journey as well, feel free to reach out to them and they will find us as well. So thank you. And David, we're just so appreciative of you coming on and sharing your story and your journey and, taking all these big steps with us. So you've done all the hard work. We're just guiding.
Yeah, well, you know how I feel about you guys, so.
Well, sadly, we're out of time for today. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, David, for sharing your insight and being so vulnerable with us and your knowledge. I really appreciate our time today, and thank you. And we will talk soon. Goodbye.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay.